Welcome. I want to introduce you to the idea of having your students working collaboratively. So working in groups or teams, and we want to address the question of why, what value is there in having them do this. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the reasoning for this. Some advantages of students working collaboratively, and I underline this, when it's done well. So before we get into that, let me point a couple things out to you. If you went out to your students and you just looked at addressed them individually and said, would you rather learn in your module during this semester by yourself individually or working collaboratively with your fellow students in the course and the module? My guess is that a large proportion of them would say, oh, no, I want to work individually. And I suggest to you that the reason for that is that probably many, if not most, if not all, of the experiences that they've had before working collaboratively with their colleagues, their fellow students, have not necessarily been positive experiences. It's our role to make sure that those are positive experiences because they can be very, very powerful learning experiences. So this series of videos that we're going to have will help kind of lay the foundation for how to do that. And again, we want to start off with the why. And again, we need to make sure it's done well, this idea of students working collaboratively. Working together, working collaboratively, enhances problem-solving skills, inspires critical thinking, improves social interactions and supports diversity. It's exposing them to new and different perspectives. Different students have different perspectives, and those perspectives may be different than mine as the instructor. Learning how to reach a consensus. And we're going to talk in another video about what consensus means, but that's an important component. Aids the development of self-management skills, time management, timeliness. So it's not just how do I work together with my fellow students, it's also what do I have to do in terms of managing myself and my own skills to make sure I have a productive interaction and collaboration with my fellow students. So again, things like time management, timeliness, certainly those are very critical. Promotes development of oral communication skills, at the very least using the vocabulary. I know back when I was an undergraduate and I was learning all these science terms and everything. In my head, I know exactly what that word was and what it meant, and I knew how to use it and say it, but as soon as I opened my mouth, I wasn't quite so sure about that. So it gives them an opportunity to practice vocabulary in a proper context of whatever it is that you're teaching with their fellow students who are also perhaps having trouble in that regard. So they're not necessarily, they learn quickly to practice the vocabulary so they don't have to embarrass themselves by maybe speaking out in class as a whole or addressing you as the instructor directly. So again, enhances development, promotes development of oral communication skills, fosters development of interpersonal relationships. Very, very important, very powerful. They learn how to leverage the talents of their peers, to recognize the talents of their peers. Those talents may be different than their own. And also, how do we leverage everyone's talents to achieve whatever goal is being set for us in our project, in our whatever the task may be that we're given. Learn to manage personalities. We all have different personalities. Sometimes there's conflict. Learning how to negotiate. So I don't always get my way as one member of this group. We have to, again, it gets back to consensus and how do we negotiate to come up with that consensus. And they also learn how to teach. And as instructors, you know that one of the most powerful ways to learn something is you have to teach it to someone else. And in those collaborative efforts, that's pretty much what they're doing. They're sharing their thoughts, they're sharing their ideas, and they're sharing their knowledge and teaching their fellow group members about whatever it is that they've learned and whatever it is that in terms of their task. And encourages idea transfer and the idea that, well, I have my ideas, but my group member here had a really good idea and I want to build upon that. Rather than saying, well, I have to have mine or that student has to have theirs, we want to put these together and build something even better than our individual ideas and efforts and skills. So those are some advantages. Now, I want to go back to the very beginning of all this sphere, all these workshops and everything. And the first step of the whole Sphere project, if you recall, was to go out and do a survey of employer stakeholders, people who are employing your students, for example, and ask them, where are the gaps? And we talked about this as skills gaps. And this includes writing, speaking, particularly English, teamwork, teamwork, groups and teams, working independently, critical thinking, computer literacy, presentation, data collection, analytical, and some others. How does having students in your module, in your classroom, work collaboratively in groups or teams? How does that relate to this? Well, as far as I'm concerned, it checks off every single one of them. They're going to be writing in their tasks. They're going to be speaking to each other, and hopefully you encourage them to speak in English. Teamwork, obviously, in groups and teams, working independently. Again, they have to do their part to contribute to the team effort, the group effort. Critical thinking, we talked about that. They're probably going to somehow, in one way or another, use computers to complete their task. There's probably going to be some sort of presentation, maybe at the end of their project or something like that. They're going to have to do research, collect data, and they're going to have to work in an analytical framework to, again, pull everything together and get that final product going. So this is, again, why I say this is an extremely powerful student learning approach, this idea of students working collaboratively, working in groups and teams. Why do it? We live in a multidisciplinary world. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, that is true. This was from a survey, University of Chicago, 55 high-tech companies. This was done a few years ago. The leading cause, that is 90% for dismissal of new employees after 3 to 6 months trial period, was inability to function effectively on teams, a lack of interpersonal skills. I cannot overemphasize how important that skill is. Let me go back one here. Again, this idea, teamwork, and then all the things that wrap into that idea of teamwork. Inability to function effectively on teams, lack of interpersonal skills was responsible for 90% of the dismissals of a new employee. They need to understand how to work effectively in that regard. Okay, we've also couched a lot of the kinds of workshops and the things we've tried to share with you in the context of this idea of student-centered learning. And again, the idea of teacher-centered learning, lecture, and pretty much doing nothing else. And we want all of us to keep moving in this direction towards student-centered learning. Clearly, integration and effective integration of working in groups and teams, students working collaboratively in your module, is moving us, is a very powerful way, again, of moving us in this direction. Also to remind you, though, that our role as instructors changes. Instead of we're the lecturer or the purveyor of knowledge, we have to be kind of partnering with them in this learning process, facilitating. We have to help them how to do this. And so again, some of the videos we have coming up here are going to give you ideas and clues on how to help your students be effective and get the most out of their collaborative learning efforts. What we're doing is we're establishing an environment very, very different from straight lecture environment. And again, we need to change our mindset as we think about not only how do we design that environment, but then how do we kind of make sure it carries out and is effective. So again, this is an introduction to why we're doing this groups and teams set of videos, and please enjoy the rest of them. Thank you.